And when we first came out, some people were sort of shocked with us starting with either the potential outcome of, hey, is this treatment right for you if you're already familiar with it, or really starting with the goal. And instead of saying, come to us for anything, we actually said, come to us if this is the outcome that you want, if this is the life that you want to live.
Welcome back to the Fitt Insider Podcast. I'm your host, Joe Veneri. Today I'm joined by Reitano, founder and CEO of Ro. In this episode, we discuss the company's direct-to-patient digital health platform. Z shares his vision for reimagining the broken healthcare system. Plus, we talk about Ro's newly launched body program for treating obesity. Let's get into it. The Fitt Insider Podcast is brought to you by Jack Taylor, our exclusive PR partner. More than just PR, they're creative storytellers and brand builders who actually understand the health and wellness industry. Learn more and get in touch at jacktaylorpr.com. Hi, Z. Welcome to Fitt Insider. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
Yeah, man, a lot to potentially get into. And I think most listeners will actually be familiar with Ro. Maybe they've used it, if not certainly heard about it. You guys have been building a pretty encompassing platform over the last few years. And for those maybe who aren't familiar, or folks that maybe have seen maybe in passing, can you maybe introduce yourself and give us the high level, what is Ro?
Yeah, sure. Hi, I'm Z. One of the co-founders and the CEO of Ro. Very simply put, Ro helps patients achieve their health goals in the most convenient and effective way. And I think what makes this different is patients come to us and they tell us what they want to achieve, right? So they come to us and say, I want to lose weight. And we have comprehensive weight loss programs. Or I want to have a child and we have fertility services. Or I want to have better sex. That's where we started. Improve my skin, improve my mental health. And the way that we deliver that in our mind, the most convenient and effective way is by seamlessly integrating the doctor's office, labs, and pharmacy. And in the last, as you mentioned, the last 5 years, we've helped over 2 million patients and one in every single county across the US.
Wow. So quite a big reach and certainly fast growth. One of the things maybe getting started is even this idea of digital health, even when Ro started, not new, but certainly novel. There was a bunch of companies coming up at the same time with different approaches to maybe how do we destigmatize certain conditions? How do we increase access to prescriptions? How do we do that in a way, like you said, that's super convenient? And now that has evolved to include a whole bunch of different categories. And in your case, leveraging different technology, remote visits, labs. And even if you look at the website, I think from sexual health to fertility to weight loss, daily health, every aspect kind of not only just like healthcare, but also well-being. How do you go about like thinking, oh, these are the markets, these are the conditions after, kind of getting initially launched in ED and sexual wellness and health, identifying what's next and like, these are the things that we want to and need to increase access to? Is it a matter of listening to patients? Is it a matter of looking at what drugs are becoming available? I'm sure some combination of all those things.
Yeah, it's a combination of all those things. Where we started actually, so I could share a little bit about sort of like why we started with sexual health and how we've progressed since. Because I think the most simple answer is that we've just continuously run after how we can help our existing patients after we serve them for one thing. How can we help them accomplish more and more of their healthcare goals? And that's how we sort of expanded. And then, as you can imagine, there's a bunch of different frameworks that we use, from markets to drugs coming online to the efficacy of that and the speed with which they're effective and the safety profile and whether we have objective healthcare data to be able to treat those things. But the simple lens of where we started was ultimately, and I can tell this with this part of the story with a smile on my face, is that every single person in my family, myself included, has had some life-threatening illness at some point in time. So I have a congenital heart condition. My sister, biggest warrior of all four of us, she is a 2-time cancer survivor and has an autoimmune disease. She's doing much better now. My mom has neurological disease, and my dad's had 4 heart attacks and a stroke. So crazy upbringing. We're all alive and lucky, and it's definitely brought us much, much closer together. But where we started was my dad was also a physician, and he saved every single one of our lives at some point in time. But when your dad is your doctor, and I think this heavily influences our lens and how we got there, just how we got to where we are today, because it is what's heavily influenced my experience in the healthcare system is that when your dad is your doctor, they care about your health, but they care about your health in service of you living a happy and fulfilled life, right? So they care about your service, or they care about your health in service of you achieving your healthcare goals. And so that reorientation completely changed how we design the experience, right? And when we first came out, some people were sort of shocked with us starting with either the potential outcome of, hey, is this treatment right for you if you're already familiar with it, or really starting with the goal. And instead of saying, come to us for anything, we actually said, come to us if this is the outcome that you want, if this is the life that you want to live. And that's one of the largest, and we talked about this, but I think that when you think about how the healthcare system is designed and why goal oriented healthcare is such a powerful concept to us, is the healthcare system is really designed either around institutions, so health insurance companies, PBMs, health systems, or it's designed around a provider's specialty, right? Cardiology, endocrinology, but it's an inward outward point of view. It's the healthcare system saying, here's how you can access us. And that places a tremendous burden on the patient. They have to navigate who they need to see, when, and in what order. But patients know what they want to achieve. They know the outcome, right? And so what we've done, and I think what I was able to grow up with, is I could go to my dad and say, here's the life I want to live, here's the outcome that I want. And he would then design these protocols and experiences to help me navigate and achieve that. And I think when you look at the best healthcare in the world, and we could sort of talk endlessly about this, so I'll be careful to not go down a rabbit hole, but when you look at the best healthcare in the world, it's goal oriented. The richest people in the world, they walk into a room and they don't worry if something's covered by their insurance. They don't worry if the right doctor's in the room because there's 10 of them in the room, right? And they say what they want to achieve. Doctors also make a recommendation about new health goals that they could also approach. But whether it's lose weight, live longer, have a child, whatever it may be, their entire experience is designed around what they want to achieve. And I think when you think about the beautiful thing about technology is turning luxuries into commodities, right? How can we take the concierge level of care that only a few people have access to and give it to everyone? And so ultimately, like that's what I'm selfishly trying to do is recreate my dad with software and give him to everyone, give that same experience to everyone. But how we started was I personally experienced erectile dysfunction as a side effect of my heart medication. I went to my dad and he knew both of those things. He knew that my history with my heart, he knew that it was a side effect of my medication. He knew how important it was for me to be intimate in the present and have a fulfilling sex life with my partner and now wife, and how important that is in the present. So if I went to him with that issue and the only and first thing he talked about were the long-term health impacts of my heart, I don't know that it would have been as productive of a conversation. So I think we think a lot about how to meet a patient at eye level, how to approach what is most important to them, build trust, and then work to accomplish some of their longer term goals in the process. And, we could talk about that with the body program and obesity. I think that's a perfect example of both present and future impact. But it starts with what are the patient's goals and we expand from there.
Yeah, I definitely want to get into all of that, unpack quite a bit. But even the idea, so the goal oriented, right, which is not typically what happens. Somebody's sick, or they're not feeling well, or they're going for a routine checkup, and we're always kind of reacting to what's going on. And to some extent, it is a luxury for most people to even have this. What do I want to achieve from my health? And then there's also the idea, which I like, you recreating your dad with software, right? That knowledge, the expertise, but also the empathy, the trust, the care that goes into it. And I think that's one of the things that's, I think about it quite a bit, is all of the innovation that's happening in digital health and the companies that are trying to change the system. Ultimately, they're still having to operate in this broken system, right? Even if you create this thing that's amazing, you still have to interface with the providers, the payers, the insurance. Is it covered? How do we get more people? How do you think about that hurdle, right? You can make it convenient. You can build that trust. You can have the relationship. You can make it goal oriented. But at the end of the day, you still have to make it fit in this broken system. Is it, hey, we have to fix this system, or we just have to build a better one over here and ultimately circumvent it?
This isn't the sort of cop out answers. I think we need to do both, because and I think I have definitely updated my thinking here over time. I think when you start any company, you need to both be a little bit naive and delusional to sort of overcome how many hurdles are put in your way. But I think philosophically, I do believe that the principal agent problem and the fact that the patient is not the customer is the single largest problem in our healthcare system from a incentive and design perspective. Right? I think that if we were able to funnel all of the money through patients at the time of purchase, I think that we would see quality improve, we'd see competition increase, we'd see costs come down, we would see everything that we see in other, capitalistic competitive markets. I think incentives work in the healthcare system. We're just not incentivizing. We're incentivizing the customer, but the customer isn't the patient. So we're not incentivizing the right outcomes that we want. I think that philosophically, when we started, we were very, very strong. We'll never take insurance. We'll only operate outside, and cash pay is the only way. And I think that how we've updated our thinking here is cash pay is an amazing proxy for when patients do have control of the flow of money at the point of purchase, and they can vote with their feet. They can say, here's what I want. And they can say, here's what I want on the spectrum of cost, quality, and convenience. And I think when you see cash pay, the cash pay environment, you see a lot of like LASIK eye surgery or cosmetic procedures. You see quality improve, you see costs come down as a result of competition, and you see things become more and more accessible. So there's a philosophical argument, and I very much subscribe to the catastrophic care arguments and the Singaporean healthcare system arguments and all of that. I deeply believe in that from an economic and incentive perspective. And then there's the practical component where we don't have, 40, 50 years for that to take place. We don't have the ability to magically send all of the money that we're spending in the healthcare system and put it into a patient's debit card and let them control the flow of funds. We're not structurally set up for that to be the case. And our healthcare system is so massive that I do think it's going to require deep, deep partnership with the existing healthcare system. And I think that there are instances where you can eat the edges on pure cash pay. And then I think it's going to require deep collaboration with the existing system. Ultimately, and it depends how many like Ben Thompson aggregation theory fans there are out there. But ultimately, I think what we're going to see with digital health in that partnership, in the integration with the existing system, though, is if all of us together, we've helped millions of patients already, but if us plus others aggregate a number of patients where we can push back on the misalignment or really poor, subpar patient experiences, given our ability to aggregate and direct them as well on their next step when they do need the existing system, I think that hopefully we can expedite the pace at which that innovation takes place. But I've definitely updated my thinking here, where I've separated my deep philosophical beliefs, which I wish we could snap our fingers and have that be the case, and sort of the practical reality of us needing to operate within parts of the existing system in order to expedite the number of people that we can help and increase access to convenient and effective healthcare.
Yeah, it's kind of constantly evolving, that the viewpoint and what's happening. I think to your point around aggregation, and almost like be so good or be so big that they can't ignore you, and then figure out what that integration kind of looks like. That brings me to another thing I wanted to talk about, which was, even to this point, you've acquired a handful of companies: Modern Fertility, WorkPath, Kit, Daddy. And I think initially, as the kind of digital health space has evolved, there's going to be all of these different companies kind of solving these conditions or for certain patients at certain times. And then it was, now it's all kind of platforms are starting to emerge around consolidation, especially when the market's kind of changing. And are some of these, more nascent companies going to be able to survive? And then what does that look like for someone who's a bigger player like you? Do you ultimately think it is going to be this kind of platform play where, in the same way we see with almost like big tech, right? The Microsofts, the Googles, Meta, it's going to be that way in digital health, the consolidation, and then figure out maybe what that aggregation and partnership looks like.
Yeah. There's a lot there, because there's both the sort of the business and market dynamics and macro effects and funding environment and all of those different things that could lead to consolidation for structural and competitive reasons. And then there's like, I think, the patient or consumer benefits that happen with both specialty plays as well as certain elements of consolidation. What I think is different about, people I think thought that this would happen in retail or in a direct to consumer environment, let's say, where people would build like next gen CPG or next gen, Procter and Gamble, where it would be, all of the sort of 2010, early 2010 rise of a lot of those direct to consumer companies. And I think the biggest difference in traditional like retail or e-commerce and healthcare, I think there are, similarities for some best practices, but the biggest difference is that there is a significant single player network effect in healthcare that does not exist in traditional e-commerce. It exists in tech, right? We see it with Google's ecosystem or Microsoft's or Apple's or whomever's it may be. But if I go buy a pair of pants, just because I bought a pair of pants and a t-shirt from the same place, it doesn't make the t-shirt and pants any better. But it does if I use like Google Docs and their calendar and Drive and whatever it may be. The same exists in healthcare, where we talk a lot about this at Row, which is the human body doesn't have walls. And so there is an advantage to an individual to getting more and more of their healthcare in one place, right? There are medications that are contraindicated one another. There are ways you're talking about our obesity program and fertility; those impact one another. As do obesity might impact their fertility, might impact their mental health, sexual health, metabolic health. And it impacts so much, right? So these things interact with one another that at a certain point there will be the typical bundling and unbundling that'll both, I think, be beneficial from a individual business perspective, but also from a patient perspective. They will see a superior product, or there is the potential, I would say, for a superior product because the human body doesn't have walls and because their treatment will actually be able to be superior if someone can look at that patient holistically and see all of their healthcare data and pull in all of the individual experiences that they're having. So I think when in the most nascent part of this digital health journey, as these things are getting unbundled, the individual product, that niche product, is so much better than being part of a larger system. But I think now we're seeing companies like us and others are 5, 6, 7 years old and we built up a ton of infrastructure, right? We have a national digital doctor's office. We built our EMR from scratch. We have 10 plus pharmacies distributed throughout the country. We have our own CLIA certified and CAP accredited lab, and we're running, tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of lab tests every year. And so we can aggregate so much information about a patient to be both proactive and reactive that if we didn't have the time to build that, or we weren't able to put multiple pieces together, we might not be able to provide that, I think, superior care by looking at them holistically. But that, I think, is the biggest difference here, is the single player network effect that we haven't yet fully seen in the industry across the board, but I think we're starting to see it, and we start to see it now on Row, actually.
Hey everyone, we'll get you back to the show in just a second. But first, I wanted to tell you about our exclusive PR partner, Jack Taylor. Honestly, this one's a no-brainer. We've known the Jack Taylor team for years. They work with some of the most innovative health and wellness companies. We're talking Whoop, Athletic Greens, Hyperice, and many more. Jack Taylor has an extensive industry network, knows how to work with high-growth companies, and really invests in building long-term relationships. I know this firsthand because they're Fitt Insider's PR agency, so I can confidently recommend them, and I do all the time. From startups to more established brands, they go beyond pushing product to help companies truly thrive. If you want to learn more, head to jacktaylorpr.com and tell them Fitt Insider sent you. Now, back to the show. Yeah, that's the hope, right? Is getting to that almost tipping point where all those things are playing in the favor of the patient such that it makes more sense to be a part of this, and therefore makes more sense to have that kind of platform. I think folks think about it, or try to go down that path where is this really data driven? Is it personalized? Is it proactive? Is it, and we're getting there, but it's not quite there yet. And I think back to your point around like having to, do you build the thing yourself or do you integrate into the existing system? It's like hearing you rattle off everything you've built to this point. It's like, well, we had to build all these things anyway ourselves. So it definitely is a little bit of both, as you mentioned it. Changing gears a little bit, one of the things we've mentioned it a couple times to this point is the Row Body program, which is newly launched, kind of taking aim at obesity with weight loss prescriptions and also coaching, building out that platform even further in the offering. Obviously, I think at this point goes without saying that obesity is growing massive problem, kind of projected to impact 50% of the U.S. population in the upcoming years, costing billions, if not more, in healthcare expenses, impacting other chronic conditions. Overall, really haven't been able to, through what most people say, hey, we just need to eat well, exercise more, and we'll figure it out. And if you're not doing that, then it's basically a willpower problem, right? That people in some way aren't able to get their own house in order to make these changes. That sentiment is kind of shifting now, especially with the rise of kind of prescription medication. So you enter this space. Can you just talk about the program, maybe some of the motivations and how it's working thus far?
You touched on so much. Everything from diet and exercise to willpower to the growth of the problem. These new innovative medications. I'd love to talk about all of them because it is something that I am deeply, deeply passionate about, and our company is very, very excited about. Original inspiration, actually. So it was personal again. We've helped over 150,000 people start their weight loss journey on Row. We originally started here because it was something that our patients were asking us for, and we started with a product called Plenity, and this was something that's what brought us originally into the space. And obviously, as we talked about before, then we started studying it deeper and deeper. What's the innovation pipeline here? What's starting to come out? What are the most effective and safe solutions for patients? And I actually saw it up close and personal. So my dad, he has struggled with weight his entire life, and he was able to lose 35 pounds on semaglutide for the first time in his entire life. And it had a massive impact not only on his weight, but his overall cardiometabolic health. And his doctors are ecstatic. And that's what really was both. There was sort of, we talk a lot about at Row that you need, data to move someone's brain. You need a story to move someone's heart. You need both to move a human. And we had, hundreds of thousands of people on Row starting their weight loss journey. And then I saw and was able to witness the impact up close and personal. So that was the combination of those two, sort of the inspiration why we built the program. How we built the program and how it works, the body program, is really designed around providing the highest quality obesity care centered around GLP-1s. So what happens is a patient comes onto Row, they go through a dynamic online visit, they answer questions about their medical history, their lifestyle choices, their challenges with weight, diet, exercise routine, all of that information. We then send them an at-home lab test from our lab. They will then fill that out, and that's covering everything from A1C to cholesterol, thyroid, kidney function. That'll be reviewed by their doctor. They'll have a video chat with that doctor. If safe and appropriate, we'll write a prescription to one of our pharmacy partners. We'll really serve as that patient's insurance concierge, help them get it covered and maximize coverage because, again, cost is prohibitive for many who aren't able to get it covered by insurance. And we've been able to do that very successfully thus far, even though the program is new. And then after they get their medication, actually, we'll send them a cellular connected smart scale. So it's our first foray into real-time remote patient monitoring. So they open up the scale, step on it. It's immediately going into their EMR. Their doctor is able to see their weight loss in real time. And that also helps us track and adapt the program to their needs, right? So we can see how do we need to titrate their dose based on their checking in, as well as if they're experiencing the appropriate amount of weight loss over the right period of time. So that's been also a tremendous thing for us, and super excited about it. And then they not only have biweekly video chats with their doctor, but they also have one-to-one coaching and 24/7 messaging. So for us, I think we're so excited about this because, one, it's very personal to us, and the size of the problem, as you described, is massive, right? About 76% of the US population has overweight or has obesity. You mentioned about 43% have obesity. And that's if we take a snapshot. That's not really if we play this movie forward, what happens based on the current trajectory of a lot of people. And so to us, it is the most common chronic disease. And I'd say disease very, very specifically. It's the most common chronic disease faced by, I would say, people in the US, but also across the globe. And it happens upstream to a lot of the things that we talk about every day, right? From diabetes to heart disease to higher risks of cancer and these macrovascular events that really lead to poorer health outcomes and increased costs, and really a more challenging quality of life and also quantity of life. So for us, the potential to leverage everything that we built over the last 5-6 years and then some, and build and add new technology on top, while attacking what we believe to be, from a patient's perspective, the largest problem in our healthcare system, is we couldn't be more excited.
Yeah, it's obviously much needed, and it's kind of a tool in the tool belt of like, how do we address these chronic issues, many of which kind of stem from this overarching issue. But at the same time, it's controversial at this point, right? For kind of a number of reasons. Who's getting access to it, right? It kind of the interest around wealthy or celebrity, being able to get the injections and afford the injections. You mentioned getting it covered by insurance, which is an important kind of step. But then it's, well, do you have to continue taking it,
Yeah.
the semaglutide?
Yeah.
If you stop, have you
Let's
made
talk
the
about all those because I think that I really do think that these questions illuminate such a significant bias towards obesity, right? That we don't fully acknowledge it for the disease that it is, right? When we talk about, oh, should patients who have diabetes or patients who have obesity get it, it's already placing, I think, a moral relative value on these chronic conditions. I don't think we would say that if it were diabetes versus heart disease. So I think it underlies, I think, an understandable but I think misguided understanding of obesity. And the same thing with whether or not you can go off the medication, right? We don't ask ourselves those questions when someone is able to get their hypertension under control or their diabetes under control with medication. We're not like, oh, it's under control. We'd love for you to go off of it. Now, if patients for semaglutide, you do see in a lot of these GLP-1s, the data does show, and there's specific reasons why, but the data does show that the majority of people will regain that weight over time. In rare instances, for some people, they are able to maintain the weight loss, and that's amazing for them, and that's fantastic. But I think it's really important that people shouldn't feel any less adequate if they are not able to do that, because I think our understanding of obesity is evolving through, in some ways, through this drug. And as you talked about, I do think it'll change our relationship with diet and exercise. I think that the biggest misunderstanding to me about obesity is the fact that it is a disease and the role that genetics play, the role that our environment has played, the heavy role, actually, I would say that genetics have played, and we could talk about that, and we could dive into all of those things. But I think that the controversy is highlighting the stigma against it. Everyone who needs a medication from a clinical perspective should have access to that medication. I don't think that, we're in the richest country in the world. We don't want to be in a position where we're saying this person should get this medication and this person shouldn't, when both of them deserve it and both of them have chronic diseases. And so I do think that supply shortage problem will be solved. Pharma companies are many things, but if they are nothing else, they are economic animals, right? So they are highly incentivized to solve this problem. And I'm very, very confident that in 2023, they will solve that supply chain problem. They have billions of reasons to solve that. But then I think the discussion, to your point, around the shortage, around who should have access to it, there aren't enough celebrities in the world to cause this shortage. So I think in essence, I think it's unfortunate, but I think it does highlight a lot of the conversation that we're having. The third thing that I think is really important is that I think we are going to see, and we could talk about this because we could talk about a couple of things here. But one, I think we'll start to see, you mentioned preventative health. I think we'll start to see a weight first approach to preventative health and have this medication be a very, very important tool in our preventative health toolkit, given the massive, what I hope we will see, reductions in all-cause mortality and overall improvements in cardiometabolic health, in addition to the just weight reduction. And then I also think this will change our relationship with diet and exercise from a wellness perspective, because to your point, diet and exercise, so amazing for so many reasons. So I want to be very clear about that, but not statistically linked to sustained and durable weight loss at a population level. It's great at preventing it, but it's not fantastic at having people lose weight in a sustainable and significant way.
Yeah, I think a lot of people were surprised to learn that it's difficult to do, even if you're somebody who exercises a ton, because when you exercise more, you eat more because you're hungry because you exercised, and that kind of cycle continues. You have to, the amount of exercise kind of to put in to get to that place is a challenge. I think even with the drugs and the prescriptions, when you think about where we are today and the number of people and the kind of scale of the problem, there certainly needs to be an intervention to kind of put a halt to this, right? So even if you think about from that level, like everybody who's overweight or obese that may have tried or maybe doesn't want to try, to the extent that it's going to require lifestyle intervention, we need to do something about this. So if this is going to help us curb this problem, we need to do it. I think there's another few things going on that raise the red flags, which is like this being positioned as kind of the only solution, given that there are biological and environmental factors at play. So, like, now we have a prescription drug that can, you know, stop, cure obesity, and pharma companies do have an incentive, right, to prescribe it and keep people on it. And then there's the other piece, which in some way gets back to the broader healthcare conversation. Do you operate within the system or do you build a new system, or how do you do that? Which is, are we going to do this? And certainly this might not be a problem for Roe to solve, right? But just talking in general, if we do use this prescription as an intervention, are we going to do anything about the food system, the environmental factors, the socioeconomic factors at play that kind of put us in a position where most people subsist on ultra processed
Yeah.
foods?
Oh,
And
there's so
then,
much here. We could talk for hours. You sure we only have 35 minutes? We could talk for a really long time. I would love to go deep here because I think it's so important. The first thing you talked about, I think, is essential, which is to make a really clear distinction between the treatment of obesity and the prevention of obesity, because the techniques are very, very different. And there needs to be a realization that if 76% of the population has overweight or has obesity and 43% have obesity, we need to focus for them on treatment, right? Because without it, they are destined to a life of worse health outcomes, unequivocally. And again, at a population level, they are destined for worse health outcomes and more expensive healthcare costs. And so, for us to not acknowledge that and approach that separately from prevention, I think is a massive, massive mistake. And that doesn't mean that prevention isn't also very important. If we had to design a system, would we say, hey, everyone should do whatever they want until they get to 45, and then let's either give them a weekly injection or we'll give them bariatric surgery where they'll rearrange their internal organs? We would never design a system like that, right? But now that we're here, and we should treat people in the best way to maximize their quality and quantity of life with the tools that we have available. And that is so essential, because I think that there's a tremendous amount of judgment. And I think the more that we understand that the position that person is actually heavily dictated by their genetics. So what I think people miss just quickly on the behavior and lifestyle versus genetics sort of conversation is that, and experts sort of vary in the exact amount, but let's just say that the high level estimate is about 75% is related to genetics and about 25% to your environment. And the way that I would think about it is, the if you think about a XY axis, X being sort of time and Y being, BMI, and those typical distribution curves that normally exist. What I would say is, let's say 25-year or 50-year time period in which you are born will determine where your distribution of BMI is from a society, like where that curve lands on that graph. But your genetics will determine where within that BMI distribution you land, right? So if you're born in the 1700s, that distribution is still going to exist, and it'll probably be a little bit tighter. There's not as much extremes as there are currently. But generally speaking, the population is going to be shifted to the left. It's not going to have as high of a BMI. Our environment has shifted, or our environment has created a shift in that overall BMI distribution, but your genetics will place you, right? Will place you on it. And so I think that is just such an important part, because I think that would lead to far less stigma and judgment if people didn't see this as an issue of willpower, right? Because there are very few healthcare conditions where when someone has it, you immediately make a judgment about their character, right? You immediately make a judgment that this person has less self-discipline, or it's an issue of willpower. And generally speaking, it couldn't be further from the truth. So the second thing that I think is really, and it is essential when having this conversation, in addition to the distinction between the prevention of obesity and the treatment of obesity, is truly, truly, truly setting aside personal opinions and really just following the data, even if it sort of violates a lot of people's priors. So from a data perspective, the two universally sort of accepted methods to treat obesity that have been proven at a general population level for significant and sustained weight loss were surgery and pharmaceutical treatment. For some people, some of the time, in some instances, cognitive behavioral therapy has been successful, as had certain meal replacements or meal plans, but not at any significant population level, right? And so we're sitting here, And we have this new incredible medical breakthrough where there's only 200,000 bariatric surgeries a year. It's impossible to treat everyone who needs it, right? We want to talk about prevention constantly, absolutely, but 76% of the US population has this problem and it's only getting worse. And we now have this new invention that can help someone fight their own biology, help them defend a lower set point without fighting satiation and hunger for 50 years of their life, which is an unreasonable ask for anyone. And the first thing that everyone does is they shit on it. And it has all these long-term cardiometabolic benefits. And so, of course, we're worried about the downsides. All drugs have downsides, but I can't tell you how, both the pipeline and the efficacy of these treatments, how powerful I think it is. And take it even to the extreme. And then would love to, keep jamming. The second part that you talked about was around like our environment, our food supply. There are so many different things from the way that we live to our entire, food supply chain that we can approach. And I haven't fully, we're going to think this out live. I haven't like fully thought down this thought experiment yet. But like, what happens if you were to just hypothetically, I'm not saying we should do this, but if you were to focus primarily on the treatment of obesity, because in terms of preventing, we've thus far been wildly unsuccessful. Like, that's another thing is like people we have things to treat it. We are horrible, like absolutely horrible at preventing it. And every single, I would say, public health initiative has been unsuccessful. Like whether it's tracks in communities, farmers markets in the parking lot, great things from a exercise, raising the level of consciousness towards healthy living, they have tremendous benefits. Like it's not to say that those don't have their benefits. They haven't been successful in preventing obesity. So I think that what's fascinating is if we have this solution and we focus on treating obesity, how does our relationship with food change as a society? Right? Like, are there just, if you did this for a few years and this drug actually fulfills the promise that we think it can and it gets distributed, like, are meal portions smaller? Are there fewer restaurants? Does everyone's entire relationship with this change? Do we see some of these natural positive cascading effects regardless because we're able to fight against sort of our old brains in this new environment? So there's a lot here, but I think it's a fascinating discussion. And I think the two things that I would summarize again are the difference in prevention versus treatment. It's a nuanced and important distinction, but there are different techniques and effective techniques for both. And the second is the really, really the importance and need to follow the data. Where we don't have strong data that one of our techniques or solutions work, it doesn't mean we stop trying. It doesn't mean we stop trying to prevent obesity. Of course not. But we can't act like we already have the answer. So there's a lot here, but you raised two like meaty topics, so I couldn't help myself. Sorry.
No, it's great kind of description, look under the hood and think about all the things that are impacting this. And obviously very important, not only to what you're working on at Roe and the kind of evolution of this category of drugs, but also obesity, chronic diseases, healthcare in general, and just how we're going to be able to confront this as a society. Because again, back to the original points, like obesity is driving so many of these other costs and conditions that we're then figuring out how to solve and pay for and creating all this stuff that why don't we? And I think this ultimately is a concern. And there's not a simple answer to this. And to your point, whether it's preventing it, treating it, maybe now with this class of drugs, but we haven't figured it out. Whether it is, going into communities and schools and saying this is what a physical education, health promotion plan looks like, or this is what healthy foods are. I think the thing that when you get right down to it, that gets the most, whether it's internet fodder or, people coming out of the woodwork, is this idea of pushing prescriptions on people while not treating the root cause. And I don't think it's that simple.
Yeah,
And
it's
I think
definitely not that simple.
yeah.
I think a lot of this is yes and, right? Like, let's say someone is able to lose a tremendous amount of weight with semaglutide. Does that mean they should not diet and exercise? Of course not, right? Like in the same way that if someone's treating their hypertension with medication, does that mean they shouldn't diet and exercise and try to also improve other aspects of their life? Like, absolutely not. They should yes and. And I think what's interesting about these medications is that in some ways, I mean, it depends on how you want to define root cause. But in some ways, it really is attacking the root cause for that individual. if this is helping that individual regulate their sugar levels, slow the passage of food from their stomach to their small intestine, regulate satiety from a brain chemistry perspective, and then increase their metabolic rate as well. Because normally, as you know, when you try to lose weight or you go on a calorie restricted diet, your metabolic rate decreases. This is actually an individual's metabolic rate will increase. And how much each one of these impacts or each one of these effects is weighted towards the outcome and what actually is the driver. It's not all even. But from a mental perspective, like the fact that this medication is making it easier for this person, it changes their relationship with food. It might make them easy. It makes it so much easier for them to defend a much lower set point
Mhm.
that might be also from a practical perspective the root cause of their excess energy intake versus energy expenditure. Because like when you really zoom out, we had a very similar amount of calories that we consume now that we did in like the early 1900s, like 1909, let's say 1900, versus now. There was a drop in there as we changed our environment and changed our behavior. Back then, like literally the existence of life was like a huge form of exercise, right? It's like we didn't have washing machines, we didn't have refrigerators, we didn't have stoves. We were like, I think at that time maybe 40% of Americans were farmers, 75% of jobs were manual labor. So like life was exercise. So yes, we could have those different calories. So there's also a practical perspective that exists now that in terms of the root cause. And then that's where prevention is really, really important, right? And that's where the separation of the discussion is really important because that's where people talk past each other, which is we shouldn't have bariatric surgery. We shouldn't use semaglutide. We need to change the food in the school system. And it's like, we need to do both of those. Like the food in the school system is not going to help the 45-year-old and it's not going to help the adults with obesity. But we've also seen massive and really sad increases in childhood obesity. And the earlier we institute diet, exercise, healthy lifestyle, and certain behaviors to help people protect against those unhealthy behaviors, especially for people who are genetically predisposed to overeating, then the better, right? So that's where I think people often talk past each other is it's a lot of yes and. It's not like just pharma or just diet and exercise or just all this. It's a lot of a combination of it. But I think what is so important is, again, it's the distinction between prevention and treatment, following the data, and really us having far more empathy and understanding that this is far more of a result of biology and the change in our environment. Um, I think bad advice in many instances than it is a moral failing of 3/4 of the population.
All the above is the kind of punchline. All the above. I think there's a part two in the works
Oh, there's
somewhere
so
in
much.
in the future
Yeah.
to circle back and revisit this. And we'll certainly be keeping tabs on what you're doing at Robin and at Row in the broader category in general as it continues to evolve. Maybe just to wrap up and kind of get you out of here on a higher level question. Looking ahead, we're early in 2023. Obviously, challenging market, economic climate, things shifting, but also now you're launching this new program. What else should we look out for, or do you kind of have on the horizon either you're excited about or you would want to tell people about to kind of give us a heads up of what's next and where you're headed?
Well, this is a big one because we built this on all of 2022, and we launched it 2 weeks ago. So this is a big one for us. But I think what you'll see us do over the next year and multiple years is honestly the really put everything under Row, which we did last year, and are doing this with the consolidation of brands. So for all listeners out there who want to check out our health goals, I will shamelessly plug Row.co, and it's easy to remember because it rhymes. Row.co. And then I think you will continue to see us go deeper and deeper in terms of the depth of the products and services we offer for these large healthcare goals for patients, as well as expanding the breadth, right? So similar to what we talked about before is in terms of the single player network effect is we want patients to be able to come to us and handle the majority of their healthcare goals and do it in the most convenient and effective way. And I think that there is an inherent convenience in being able to go to one place for all your healthcare, right? And so that's what we'll continue to run after. And the order in which we'll do it will largely, if not, 100% be led by our patients' wants and needs.
Yeah, that's awesome. We'll definitely be keeping tabs on everything you have going on. And for folks that want to check it out, row.co will be in the show notes. We'll get all the links set up and appreciate you taking some time to chat with us today. It was a great conversation.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on. Looking forward to part two.
Yeah. One more thing before you head out. Help us spread the word. Take a minute to rate and review the podcast, subscribe to the YouTube channel, or share this episode with a friend. And if you like conversations like this, you'll love the Fit Insider newsletter. We send it every Tuesday. The link is in the description. Thanks again for listening. We'll see you back here next week.